Donald Trump is throwing a big wrench into the wheels of global business and starting a trade war with China. But is it a war that he can win? Let's get to the bottom line.
China insinuating today that President Trump is lying.
Now breaking news, China responding to President Trump's trade war, saying no talks or negotiations are taking place. This as the White House shifts its tone.
The ongoing trade war between the U.S. and China, it could finally be cooling off. President Trump said yesterday negotiations are, quote, active, while the spokesperson for Beijing says that their door is wide open for talks.
Tensions between the world's two largest economies are affecting the fate of global trade and geopolitical balances more than ever. During his tenure, former U.S. President Donald Trump's aggressive trade policies against China have both galvanized his supporters and sparked fierce debates around the world. But has this trade war really played out the way Washington wanted? Or has Beijing been able to get out of the way and gain its own advantage? The recent rhetoric on Chinese social media that Trump acted cowardly reveals that the massive rivalry between the two countries is actually taking on a different dimension.
This has been trending on Weibo, and the trending hashtag is Trump caved in. It's number 2 trending topic on Chinese social media.
It is observed that millions of Chinese internet users see a huge gap between Trump's assertive words and his actual results, and fill this gap with all kinds of ridicule and criticism. When this perception is combined with the question, where are the tough rhetoric and where are the concrete gains? Can we say that the US-China relationship has become a nuanced psychopolitical playground? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications and hit the like button. The US-China standoff, dubbed the trade war, has not been limited to tariff hikes or financial market ups and downs. The two countries' technological, military, diplomatic, and even cultural rivalry has constantly drawn the world's attention to this conflict. Before his election, Donald Trump had frequently stated that China was cheating the US, violating intellectual property rights and harming the American economy with unfair trade practices. When he took office, he took successive harsh steps against Beijing under the slogan America First.
A new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Rising tariffs, sweeping restrictions on imports from China, embargoes on tech giant Huawei, rhetoric urging his own companies to pull production out of China. All this has caused serious turbulence for the global economy. But China was quick to respond. In retaliation for the tariffs, it imposed taxes on the top export destinations of American manufacturers, blacklisted some American companies, and, with the support of Chinese users on social media, sent a clear message. Whoever threatens us will get a response. The role of Chinese social media has been remarkable. Since many of the platforms common in the West, e.g. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, are banned or restricted in China, local channels such as Weibo, WeChat, and Douyin stand out. On these platforms, despite state control and censorship mechanisms, millions of users can comment on the agenda through instant posts. It is precisely in this environment that the Chinese reaction to Trump's harsh outbursts is summarized as, Trump shouts a lot. But when it got serious, he acted cowardly and had to retreat. At first he said, I will destroy China. But in the end, he sat down with Beijing and signed the Phase 1 trade agreement, which did not bring as harsh results as the US hoped, users agree. Moreover, they say, US producers, especially in agriculture and technology, have suffered greatly in the process. Trump's crisis management during the pandemic has also raised the level of criticism from Chinese internet users. The image of a leader who set out with the slogan, America First, but was shaken by the COVID-19 pandemic, has led to the adjective coward gaining more adherents.
A new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Of course, it would be wrong to see this cynical approach as simple humor. Social media is also a medium that feeds China's nationalist sentiments. Chinese society, which for years has consciously or unconsciously nurtured a sense of rivalry against the great powers of the West, has combined the idea that Trump threatened a lot but failed to get results with the euphoria of victory. The term coward is sometimes used to mean a leader who puffs himself up with empty threats. In Weibo discussion threads, Phrases such as Trump proved that the one who shouts the loudest is actually the weakest link are shared thousands of times. Some users said, months of tweeting and the result? We are the ones who are still standing. We supply the world with our masks and products, and the US is miserable in the pandemic. Some users like to add humor. China's relatively rapid recovery during the pandemic and the chaotic landscape in the US sharpened this criticism of cowardice. In the same period, the fact that TikTok still had a huge user base in the US, despite Trump's threatening rhetoric of, "I will shut down TikTok," was an example of failure for the Chinese. They interpreted this as, he wanted to shut it down, he couldn't do it, it was just words again. In fact, the phrase, Trump acted like a coward, is a symbolic indicator of the intricate nature of US-China relations in recent years. So much so that when Trump initially launched tariffs and said, "I'm going to get China," the markets experienced serious turbulence. The dollar-yuan parity fluctuated, global producers started discussing shifting their supply chains from China to countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and Mexico. But in the aftermath, the US also suffered. American agricultural exports were hit hard. The supply of industrial raw materials became more difficult, and access to the Chinese market for companies like Apple and Qualcomm became uncertain. Some reports suggested that the trade war also imposed billions of dollars of additional burden on the US economy. US business circles, disturbed by this picture, sent a message to the Washington administration. This is too much. It is hurting our profits. As a result, Trump agreed to a so-called Phase 1 trade agreement in early 2020. On paper, this agreement requires China to buy more American products, but in practice, China has missed many targets. Between pandemic excuses and changes in domestic demand, it has failed to fulfill its promise of, "I will increase your exports." Chinese social media interpreted this situation as, he has broken his promise again, and America has not gotten what it expected. At this point, the view that Trump made big words but left the stage without getting what he really wanted is becoming widespread. In the past, many of the arguments used by the US to contain China were characterized by Beijing as Cold War leftovers. Trump has started to bring these arguments back to the agenda in very sharp language. They steal our technology. They manipulate the global market. They steal intellectual property. Thus, the trade war has also been characterized by an emphasis on national security. Embargoes on Huawei, for example, have been characterized by espionage risks, and there have been attempts to ban Chinese companies in 5G infrastructure. This process, which has turned into a technology war as well as trade competition, has strengthened the Chinese view that they are trying to prevent our development. They are actually the ones who are afraid. Users on social media have labeled Trump's policy as cowardly moves, saying America has taken refuge in tariffs, and when it sees that it cannot compete with us in production, it creates obstacles. According to them, a strong competitor engages in direct competition, and trying to restrain it with bans or embargoes is a sign of fear. In short, Trump is scared. Otherwise, he wouldn't need such measures, was echoed in nationalist posts. This attitude has also been at least tacitly endorsed by the Chinese state media. In the Trump era, official newspapers and television channels have been running with the theme, America is attacking, but China is standing firm. Every step back, every decision by Washington to lower or postpone tariffs was exemplified by saying, look, they couldn't force us. Social media, as the dynamo of nationalist sentiment, amplified these messages with mass shares. In other words, the phrase, Trump acted like a coward, functioned both as an angry but amusing outburst by ordinary internet users and as an extension of an implicit state discourse. Sometimes news that tit-for-tat practices were overwhelming the United States was brought to Weibo with humorous visuals. Many young users took selfies and videos saying, "We are boycotting American goods." In addition, the comment, "Even Wall Street is against the trade war. Trump is ranting alone," was common. This reinforced the idea that he can't even find support for himself. With the pandemic, the priority of the trade war has receded somewhat, but the US-China conflict has not ended. New files such as the supply chain crisis, shortages of masks and medical supplies, and vaccine diplomacy were added to the debate. By mid-2020, Donald Trump was directly accusing Beijing of the Chinese virus and raising allegations of laboratory leaks. This aggressive tone provoked a strong reaction from the Chinese state at the official level. The US president, who cannot manage his own epidemic and whose death toll has reached a record high, blames others and acts cowardly again, the social media post said. The emphasis on coward and weak leader was also used here to create the image of an administration that is unable to deal with the pandemic it should be fighting. So it takes refuge in aggressive and accusatory rhetoric. Even discussions on Weibo titled "Trump a Big Bubble" became a hot topic. On the other hand, increasing criticism of Trump in US domestic politics and his loss in the presidential election at the end of 2020 multiplied the sarcastic comments on Chinese social media. The great trade warrior president, now that he's gone, what's left? The question, what happened to China collapsing? On the contrary, Chinese exports are breaking records. Popular cartoons on social media depicted Trump trying to break down trade walls with a huge hammer in his hand, only to hit the wall himself. The subtext of the coward characterization was he wanted to look tough, but in reality he ran into a wall, acted out of anger instead of courage, and in the end failed to write a great success story. Even with Biden in power, not much has fundamentally changed in US-China relations. Most tariffs have not been lifted, but at least the tone is more diplomatic. This makes the acrimony of the Trump era remembered as amateur outbursts. Some researchers who have studied this issue on Chinese social media say that the posts are not just spontaneous, but that the state is monitoring and directing at certain points. This is because under normal circumstances in China, messages that contradict the state or incite extreme nationalism can sometimes be censored. But when it comes to challenging the United States, they argue, a certain degree of freedom is allowed, even when such rhetoric is in line with the government's interests. Thus, bashing Trump becomes a matter of national pride. The term coward implies both that the US is exaggerating the situation and that it is underestimating the power of China. After all, if the tariffs and sanctions imposed by the US have not had the desired effect, it is easy for internet users in China to say, "This guy just thundered and then chickened out." This view is a reference to Trump's well-known style of, he just tweets, makes a mess, and then backs off. But how does the "Trump was a coward" narrative resonate internationally? Western media outlets often quote this narrative as, the Chinese want to show that they are not afraid of Trump. Some analysts in the US, while acknowledging that Trump's trade war policy has not been well managed, say that not taking any action against China was not an option, but at least we sat down at the table with Beijing. There are also many who believe that Trump's intentions to protect American companies with tariffs have been frustrated by the volatility of the real economy and the anger of farmers. While this provides a basis for social media humor, some in the US argue he was a brave leader, but the pandemic intervened. He lost the election. Maybe in his second term, he would dispel the image of fear. The Chinese, on the other hand, laugh at such scenarios. There is no such thing as a second term. Trump is gone. In 2023 and 2024, the Joe Biden administration is signaling to revive some of the trade negotiations while maintaining technology restrictions on China. Lifting some tariffs could also help fight inflation in the US. However, these softening steps do not mean that PRC products will enter the US market completely freely. In the coming years, if Trump or a similar leader becomes US president again, it is not yet clear whether Chinese social media will once again resort to cowardly or big talk but no results characterizations, or whether a more serious crisis will erupt. This uncertainty keeps the Cold War 2.0 narrative in circulation. This is because trade wars are only one pillar of the two sides' strategic rivalry. From the South China Sea to the Taiwan issue, from global supply networks to the race for artificial intelligence, power is being tested on many fronts, fueling such cynical rhetoric. The Chinese may extend their accusation of Trump's cowardice to US politics in general, as Biden continues to navigate similar constraints. The message that they back down when they see big risks at stake is a propaganda tool that is always kept warm by nationalists. At this point, the following question comes to mind. Could this cynical tone on Chinese social media escalate tensions in US society or politics? Theoretically, if American leaders are uncomfortable with being portrayed as cowardly or weak in the outside world, they could resort to more aggressive behavior. For example, if they believe that our reputation is being damaged, let's teach it a lesson. They could make sharp moves in the commercial or military spheres. On the other hand, the fact that Trump is not taken seriously by his opponents anyway is a shared view in the US, also in domestic politics.